The recession of the last few years has made it harder to live in Boston. Many who lost their jobs, got foreclosed on, or just couldn't earn enough became homeless along with their children. In the past, those families could turn to the state for help, but the New England Center for Investigative Reporting found that the need for help has left thousands of homeless families languishing in hotels. WGBH's Rupa Shenoy reports.
For 7 months, this hotel has been home for 20-year-old Sherrod Chase, his 4-year-old sister, and their mother.
3 different personalities in a room, and you start to annoy each other because you get bored.
The state placed Sherrod's family at the Bedford Plaza Hotel after their state rental assistance ran out and they were evicted from their apartment.
It kind of feels like you're in prison, I guess, a little. You have to be in your room at a certain time. You can't be in the common area at a certain time because if you do, they'll boot you out of the common area, and if you don't listen, then they'll write you up, and then that could be, expulsion from the program.
The Plaza Hotel became a de facto homeless shelter after the State Department of Housing and Community Development ran out of shelter space. At one point, more than 90 families were living here at a cost of $80 per family per night. Some local residents don't like it. Residents like Jessica Lantine stood in line last October waiting to vent their concerns.
Do the people of Bedford have a say in whether it ends up being a hotel or a shelter?
Meanwhile, the state says it plans to move families out over the next several months by expanding its number of temporary shelters from 2,000 to 3,600. The legislature needs to come up with a total of $91 million for congregate shelters like this one in Dorchester.
Well, a congregate shelter just means it's a shared living space, so every family has its own room, and then there's shared living rooms and kitchens and bathrooms.
Tom Lorello of the agency Heading Home says the shelters have staff and support services, so they cost more than hotels, about $100 a day per family. The state may pay that for a while as homeless families wait to be placed in affordable housing.
That's a waiting game. You wait and you wait. A lot of the lists are years long.
Something Sherrod Chase knows well.
At the end of the day, they're the ones making the decision, so we just have to wait on them, I guess.
For Sherrod, that wait ended last week. The state moved his family to a subsidized apartment of their own. But 48 other families, including 100 children, are still at the Bedford Plaza waiting.
And Emily, for the full expansion to happen, the state legislature still has to approve $76 million.
So they're on the road to it. They've already approved some, but they've got to do the rest of it in order to move to these congregate shelters. All right, interesting. Thanks, Rupa. All right, well, this story was produced with our partners at the New England Center for Investigative Reporting, a nonprofit investigative unit based at Boston University and here at WGBH. So why did the state start housing so many homeless families in hotels? Here to address that is Aaron Gornstein, a longtime affordable housing advocate who now serves as the State Undersecretary for Housing and Community Development. Welcome to Greater Boston.
Thanks for having me.
So while these families are in these hotels, are they also do they have jobs? Are they on a road? Do they go through programs? Are they on a road to getting themselves out of poverty?
Well, in our emergency shelter system, we're working very closely with each family on job training and job support, other kinds of support services that they need. Some families are working for sure, but our goal is really to help them become economically self-sufficient through a variety of different approaches that we're using. So our goal is to provide the transitional help that they need, get back on their feet, and then move them into permanent housing as quickly as possible.
One of the families we were talking with told us, well, they're not allowed to have a car. So one family in particular had to get public transportation 60 miles one way to a job. It's like, you can't have a car?
Yeah, and well, that's the reason we want to try and move as many families from the motels, be less
Why not
reliant,
just let them have a car?
Be less reliant on the motels, so they can get into permanent housing, back into the community, have access to public transportation. There's an asset limit on being eligible for emergency shelter, so it's something we have to look at. We have to screen the families carefully in terms of making sure that they're eligible.
All right, let me bring another voice into the discussion. Libby Hayes is a former homeless shelter director and now the executive director of Homes for Families. So a lot of these motel situations, I have to say, look pretty horrible. But do you think that the congregate situation is going to be better?
Depends really on the family. Each family is so different and their circumstances are different. What's different about the congregates in the shelters is the staff, the support. Yeah. The congregates are generally located closer to public transportation. They have the 24-hour support, so families are more easily able to get to jobs, job training programs, get support for their children, and have more access to kitchens and the space that they need to the children to grow, to thrive.
So one of the criticisms, and I've heard you address this before, Aaron, is that people are coming from out of state because Massachusetts still has a reputation as being very generous with benefits like this, and that the safeguards aren't in place carefully enough so that people can come from New York City one day and then 2 weeks later get, housing here, because they're supposed to prove that they live here, but if they don't, they can get it anyway.
Well, they have to show Massachusetts residency. It's a requirement in the statute, and we make sure to enforce that. Some families do have ties to this state from out of state. They may be living with friends or relatives for a while, establish residency, enroll their kids in school, and then they could be eligible for shelter. But we also look at their income, and we look at what categories of eligibility, such as domestic violence and other issues like that.
Libby, what is the ultimate solution to this? There's always going to be a certain part of the population that finds themselves in dire straits, like Sherrod's family. I mean, now they've moved to an assisted apartment situation, but is this just going to be an endless cycle for those people?
It has been. The problem's grown and grown in the past 30 years since the system was first established, because the gap between wages and rent has grown so much. So we really need to look at taking a multi-pronged approach where we're looking to increase wages and looking to increase the stock of affordable housing. Now, even if you look at the jobs that we have open in the greater Boston area, in the service industry, the healthcare industry, there's jobs that people can work 40 hours a week and still not be able to afford rent. So we need to look at expanding our stock of affordable housing, having more subsidies so people can afford it, address the wage issue, and then also get people into education programs on a pathway where they can make enough money to be able to sustain. But at the base of it is that we have a big affordable housing shortage, and that's what needs to be addressed.
How did this hotel thing ever get going? It's been around for a long, long time, I mean, 20 years at least, but it seems like the same criticisms have plagued that system for decades. I mean, are you trying to get rid of it completely?
Yeah, I mean, we have, over the years, the state has had to rely on the motels as an overflow shelter system. It's our last resort. It's not what we prefer to do. But if our regular shelter system is full, we're obligated to place families who are eligible that same day. Yeah. That's the policy that we have in Massachusetts. But we are taking a comprehensive approach. All the strategies that Libby outlined are things we're moving very aggressively on homeless prevention, creating more permanent affordable housing, and the governor has really made unprecedented investments in permanent housing. We funded 3,000 affordable units last year, and we're also working again on a range of support services, especially around job training and placement. So it's that comprehensive approach that I think is going to work the best, and we're already seeing the numbers of families in the motels coming down. We saw a 10% reduction since December, so we're moving in the right direction. This
is still an outrage factor, and I know you both hear it every day from people who think, you know what, why can't these people get it together? Why am I paying for their housing?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, where people that are working still can't afford rent. Families that don't, and they look at the job market that we have here, and a lot of the jobs for low-skilled jobs aren't here anymore. So there's people that really want to get it together and want nothing more than to get it together, but don't have the access to the places to do that, or if they do get jobs, it still isn't enough to afford rent and basic necessities. So I think families that are in the shelter program, they want nothing more than to have a better life for themselves and their children, and need the support and the access and the opportunities to do that.
There's a movement afoot just to build housing and give it to people. Would you support that?
Well, we are building affordable housing, but people who live in affordable housing do pay rent as a percentage of their income. We're trying to really revitalize and preserve our state public housing, for example. So we have to use all of our available resources as best we can. But there are some people who need help in paying their rent. We also are helping people to become homeowners as well in Massachusetts. So we really try and work across a range of incomes, and people's needs are very different.
All right, Aaron Gorenstein, Libby Hayes, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.